Greetings and salutations everyone, and welcome to Let's Play Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Father. I'm Kamchak Fisko, and come join me for the first of the trilogy of Gabriel Knights. We haven't done the museum, we gotta go back there.
Welcome, my friend.
Hello?
I am the proprietor, Dr. John. If you have any questions, I will be happy to assist.
Great. My name is Knight, and I'll probably take you up on that. Could I ask you some questions?
That is why I am here.
What can you tell me about voodoo?
Historical voodoo? Or the voodoo currently practiced in the city?
What do you know about the voodoo murders?
The killings in the newspaper? I know that they have nothing to do with true voodoo in New Orleans.
What makes you think the voodoo murders aren't being done by local practitioners?
Voodoo is a popular boogeyman, Mr. Knight, especially in New Orleans. Anyone can pretend to use it, just as anyone can pretend to be a black belt in karate, and for the same reason, to intimidate. I know voodoo in this city, Mr. Knight, and believe me, it is not about killing. Even the police have stated that the killings have nothing to do with local voodoo.
Nothing to do with local voodoo?
So you know nothing about the voodoo murders case?
I neither know nor care to know, Mr. Knight. My only possible interest is in how it might affect the public's attitude towards the museum.
That's fair.
So far, it has not been an issue. No one has even had the bad taste to bring it up. Until you, that is.
Yeah, Gabriel doesn't have good taste.
So you...
Okay, so that's looped.
What?
I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's just loops to the new categories.
What do you think of New Orleans?
It is the only city in the United States as far as I am concerned.
That's a statement.
What is it about New Orleans that you so admire?
It has a real culture of its own, Mr. Knight, amid the horrid blandness that is Americana. New Orleans alone has a voice.
Spoken like a true New Orleanian.
Technically speaking, this was during the 90s. This was 1993, so culturally speaking, the 90s was just coming into its own out of the 80s, so that actually would have been a fairly bland cultural time.
Do you have anything else to say about New Orleans?
I have already given you my opinion, Mr. Knight.
Wow.
Do you know anything about snakes?
You have perhaps noticed the museum's snake, Mr. Knight. They are beautiful creatures, do you not agree? And the tourists seem to associate them with voodoo.
Is the snake yours? Do you use it in your practice of voodoo?
I admire the spirit of the snake, Mr. Knight, but snakes like the museums can be quite dangerous to handle.
You didn't really answer my question.
I think I did, Mr. Knight.
No, actually you didn't. And you evaded answering the question.
I'd really like to know more about your snake.
There is really nothing more to say, Mr. Knight.
Maybe a scale from the snake? Just saying.
What can you tell me about St. John's Eve?
It is one of the important ceremonial nights in voodoo.
You gonna be a little more specific than that?
What else can you tell me about St. John's Eve?
I am afraid I do not know the origins of St. John's Eve. I only know that it was a night of ritual long before voodoo came to New Orleans.
So it predates the voodoo in the city.
What else can you tell me about St. John's Eve?
I am afraid I have little else to say about that subject.
Okay.
Do you have any idea what caprice encore means?
I fear my French is not all it should be, Mr. Knight.
Have you ever heard of a Schottenjäger?
No, I have not.
Tell me about yourself.
Tell me about yourself.
Me?
Yes, if you don't mind.
What is it you wish to learn?
Oh, cool. We can ask a bunch of questions.
Why did you open a voodoo museum?
The subject has fascinated me all my life, and I wanted to help preserve the cultural heritage it represents.
That's fair.
What kind of background in voodoo do you have?
Let us say that I cut my teeth on it, Mr. Knight. It is in my blood.
That's a way to put it.
Do you do anything besides run the museum?
No. The museum does not make me a rich man, but my material needs are simple. I prefer to focus on my one true interest in life.
So he's very passionate about his Voodoun origins and voodoo.
What are your own religious beliefs?
My beliefs are too personal and too complex to discuss with a layman, Mr. Knight.
Burn!
Just tell me anything.
I am originally from the West Indies myself, you know.
Really? What brought you to New Orleans?
I was drawn here for personal reasons.
I'm gonna guess voodoo.
Just tell me anything.
I am a vegetarian.
Really? I can't imagine living without meat.
That must be the hunter in you, Mr. Knight.
Just tell me anything.
I do not care for small talk, Mr. Knight.
Actually, I can't think of a thing.
Then, let us discuss something else.
Let's discuss his focus of
Tell me
expertise.
about historical voodoo.
Very well. I will start at the beginning, Mr. Knight, and will go on from there at your prompting.
Sounds good.
As you may know, voodoo is a grassroots religion formed by the mixing together of many different African tribal religions and Anglo religions, such as Catholicism or Protestantism. In other words, it is a religion born of the African slave trade. But African slaves were imported not only by the United States, but also into the West Indies, where the French and Spanish ran plantation islands. Prior to 1803, the New Orleans area was owned by France. The French Creole in those days owned many African slaves. But the Creole did not permit their slaves to gather, giving no chance for voodoo to breed here natively.
The Creole also knew enough about the corrupted pagan practices of the West Indies slaves to ban the importing of slaves from that region.
Wow, they really cracked down on them. The French Creole.
So, how did voodoo come to New Orleans?
After the Louisiana Purchase, American legislators relaxed regulations. Slaves were permitted to gather. The Americans also removed the ban on West Indies slaves.
Around the same time, a slave revolt occurred in Santo Domingo, what is now Haiti. Between the lifting of the ban and the Haitian revolt, West Indies slaves began pouring into New Orleans.
Some of them were free people of color, freed or escaped slaves. Some came with their white owners who were fleeing from the revolt.
Interesting. So they were finally able to practice their beliefs and their culture even as slaves because it was no longer being restricted because they came to America itself.
What happened when the West Indies slaves got here?
They brought voodoo with them. The native slaves were more than enthusiastic about embracing it. It gave them power, Mr. Knight, if only in the form of a communal bond. Among the first meeting places were the Bayou Saint John and the shore of Lake Pontchartrain. The early voodoos were heavy snake worshippers, worshipping the one they called the Great Zombie.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
By 1817, the voodoo activities were beginning to cause fear among the white slave owners. An ordinance was passed to forbid slave gatherings except in designated public areas at designated times. The time was Sunday afternoons and the place Congo Square. The slaves and free people of color gathered to dance simulations of their voodoo dances right in sight of Creole society. Of course, they also continue to meet in private for the real thing.
Makes sense, because you wouldn't want them, you don't want them to know what you're really doing, especially if it's giving you a sense of power. You'd want to show them something fake, because you're already dealing with an ungodly amount of oppression and enslavement. So why the hell would you want to let them know the real thing? Makes perfect sense.
Tell me more about historical.
Especially if they're paranoid of it.
There were a variety of kings and queens at first, voodoo priests and priestesses. But from about 1830, a single power emerged. This was a voodoo queen named Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau ruled voodoo in New Orleans for many years.
Yep.
Tell me more about historical voodoo.
I've given you as much detail as I can, Mr. Knight. Look around the museum if you desire more information.
Tell me about current voodoo.
Many people think of voodoo in terms of magic spells or gree-gree. That kind of practice is actually called hoodoo, and is only a part of true voodoo. Voodoo, the religion, has a strong following in New Orleans. In fact, it is growing quite rapidly. There are several voodoo churches or temples in the city, and others all across the United States. African Americans see it as a tradition all their own. Whites, and there are many in their religion, are attracted to it because they think it is exotic. I, personally, am more interested in the history of voodoo. Some of the new movements are copying Haitian or even African voodoo. But it is the voodoo of New Orleans that I find so intriguing.
I can honestly say, as a white person, I'm not interested in because of this exotic. It's actually because of this game. It made me fascinated with the strength and the power and the communal bond it gave to the people that were being oppressed. And it's such a radical and impressive thing. And it's such a complex belief. And I have absolute respect for it. I mean, I don't believe in voodoo. I don't believe in any religion. But I have a lot of respect for what they used it for and what it gave them, because it's really fucking impressive, especially considering what they were dealing with.
Tell me more about current voodoo.
There are many voodooians in New Orleans. They often do business selling gree-gree, telling fortunes, providing luck, and occasionally misfortune. Perhaps you would like to meet a voodooian. We refer those who seek a deeper experience with voodoo to a local practitioner, Magentia Moonbeam.
Sure, I'd love to meet her.
She lives on the corner of Orleans and Dauphine. I will call her and tell her you might stop by.
Great, thanks.
Contacts, more information.
Tell me more about current voodoo.
You have tapped my resources. My expertise is really historical. Perhaps Ms. Moonbeam can be of further help.
All right.
Do you know Malia Getty?
Should I?
She referred me to your museum.
Many have read about our museum in the newspapers, Mr. Knight.
That's a good point.
That's fair.
Is there anything else I should know about voodoo?
Not if your interest is primarily in voodoo. Hoodoo is of interest to those who study rural folk traditions, but it will not aid you in understanding true voodoo.
So treat it as a side tangent that's more of it kind of grew into its own thing, and it's not really part of voodoo. It's more like a subset of voodoo. It's like Protestant versus Catholic. It's a subdivision that branched off.
Is there anything else I should know about voodoo?
So that's about Marie Laveau.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
There were actually two Marie Laveaux, mother and daughter. Most people thought they were the same woman. Her continued youth added to the mystique.
That's
the
cool.
original, the mother, was also known as Widow Paris. It was she that began the empire. When the Widow Paris began to practice, there were many Voodooans in the city. By 1830, she was Voodoo Queen of all New Orleans.
Damn.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
The widow Paris was a hairdresser for rich Creole ladies. She also paid household servants to spy for her. Between the two, she knew everything about everyone who mattered in New Orleans. She was not above using her information to appear psychic, to intimidate, or even to blackmail.
You sound as though you admire her.
For a black woman in the mid-1800s to gain power is an incredible thing, Mr. Knight. However, she achieved
I gotta
it.
agree with him on that. It's what she was able to do, that she was able to rise up to power and wield it for her people. That's a fucking impressive thing. Whether or not you approve of her methods, what she did was still amazing.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
She kept a pet snake, danced with it too. She held traditional voodoo ceremonies out by the lake. She took herself seriously, very seriously. But she was not above selling tickets for her events to curiosity seekers. She was not above using voodoo any way she could to make money. That is for certain.
I mean,
But
bring in the
if
roots.
she had been in another line of work, in another age, that would have been interpreted as entrepreneurial genius rather than a sign of fraudulence.
Hey, you don't need to convince me. I admire anyone that can actually make a living. Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
It was Marie Laveau who defined the voodoo that is truly and uniquely the voodoo of New Orleans. She invented hundreds, if not thousands of spells, potions, charms, and incantations. These form the basis of the modern practice, not to mention the folk tradition of hoodoo.
That's literally built an empire and her own version of a belief structure, essentially. Because Voodoun, New Orleans Voodoun is very different from original Voodoun.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
Her daughter, Marie Glapion, took over when the widow Paris got old. Most people thought it was the same Marie Laveau. Both Maries encouraged that point of view. The widow Paris died in 1881. Marie Glapion had been reigning a long time by then. After the death of the widow Paris, other voodoo queens surfaced, and by 1890, the cult was fragmented again. Marie Glapion just sort of faded away.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
The Laveau tomb, where one or both of the Maries are believed to be buried, is in St. Louis Cemetery number 1.
It's the one
It
from
is
writing
a
on it.
popular shrine for practitioners and tourists alike. I myself take tours through the cemetery on a regular basis.
Really? Do you have any running this week?
No, but the cemetery is open to the general public as well.
So if we hadn't learned about the cemetery from Granny, we would have learned it from him.
Tell me more about Marie Laveau.
You have heard everything about Marie Laveau that a layman might expect to understand.
That is both fair and insulting. So I think that's all the conversations. All right. So now we have new people to talk to, new conversations.
I'll be going.
Come back again.
Very informative guy.
My personal thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in. You all are awesome viewers. Really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. It means a lot to me, and I do hope you enjoy it. You all take care of yourselves. If you want to see more of me, keep the video on the list, or stay tuned for more. Feel free to leave a comment below. Please remember to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. In the meantime, fare thee well, everyone.